Louise Yaxley home to face months of rehabilitation. 2 Tasmanians survive a yachting tragedy in northern Queensland. And the RSPCA shocked by hundreds of dead and starving sheep in the Midlands. Good evening. Tasmanian cyclist Louise Yaxley, who survived an horrific road smash in Germany, has spoken publicly for the first time. Although facing months of rehabilitation, Yaxley is optimistic about her future and even hopes to ride again. Yaxley is back in Tasmania after an accident that almost claimed her life.
This morning, Louise Yaxley put the trauma of the July accident on hold as she spoke publicly for the first time since coming home.
I always sort of tell myself that I am lucky, you know, and so that sort of keeps me and helps me to remain positive.
Yaxley received head, chest, leg and arm injuries in the accident. She says doctors initially wanted to amputate an arm at the elbow, but the decision was overruled.
And it was a university education hospital, and so they had professors, and so they said, bring her in and we'll have a go, and they were able to save my arm, which is incredible.
With the long future of therapy sinking in, so is the reality of what happened.
Not only will I have to come to terms with my own injuries, but also the loss of a close friend and teammate, Amy Gillett.
And will Louise again take to the road?
It's quite a few months off that I'll be able to actually hop on the road, and I'll address that when I have to. But yeah, I'm positive right now, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So keep our fingers crossed.
And she can expect plenty of support from the sidelines.
I'll be encouraging her. If she doesn't want to get back on the bike, that's fine. If she does, well then, you know, I'll be there as well. So it's her decision, and we just got to wait and see how things go.
And so Louise Yaxley has begun this long road to recovery and freely acknowledges it's going to be family and friends that help her complete the journey.
It's just a lot of rest and recuperation and quiet times she needs. It's going to take a long while to get over this.
Peter Gilligan, Win News.
A Tasmanian couple are among survivors of a yachting tragedy in northern Queensland. 2 men died when the boat sank after being hit by a freak wind gust off Hinchinbrook Island. It's thought the 46-year-old skipper drowned while trying to swim to a nearby island to get help. The other man died at the scene.
Not long after arriving in the search area, we were told that there was another deceased person brought up from the water.
2 Tasmanians and 3 people from New South Wales survived the sinking. The names of the Tasmanians have not been released. Hundreds of starving sheep are dying in paddocks in Tasmania's Midlands, sparking outrage from the RSPCA. The society estimates already 150 sheep have died in the paddocks near Oatlands, with many more seriously malnourished. A warning, this story shows images of animals in distress which may upset some people.
Barely able to move, let alone walk, this sheep is one of many left stranded in this Midlands paddock to slowly starve to death. The RSPCA was called to this property at York Plains just past Oatlands yesterday afternoon after receiving an anonymous tip-off. What they found was worse than they expected.
They appear that they've starved and been too weak to rise, and that's where they've dropped is where they've laid and died.
The RSPCA says the property is grossly overstocked with not enough food to feed the number of animals. They estimate more than 150 sheep have perished. Many more close to death will most likely have to be put down.
It's believed the RSPCA is currently interviewing the owner of the property and the sheep. It's yet to be determined whether criminal charges will be laid.
They can receive a penalty for aggravated cruelty up to $10,000 and or 18 months imprisonment, or $5,000 for just cases of cruelty and or 12 months imprisonment.
In 1993, the Animal Welfare Act was introduced in an attempt to protect animals from acts of cruelty. Coincidentally, today in Parliament it was announced a major review of the Act is taking place.
Some of the problems that we've encountered through the judicial process has been that descriptions of officers haven't been clear. The limitation of time, 6 months for people to prosecute their case, has also been a problem in the past, so we believe that this is a comprehensive way of reviewing the legislation and implementing what we believe needs to be in there.
And while that won't help those sheep that have already died, the RSPCA hopes a lesson can be learnt.
If they can't afford to feed them, and perhaps best that they get rid of them because we really don't want to find what we found yesterday on any other properties.
Erin O'Toole, Win News.
The government is still refusing to conduct random drug searches of those coming off the Spirit ferries in Devonport, despite admitting nearly 20% of the few currently searched are carrying drugs. The revelation marring news of a resurgence in passengers on the Sydney ferry.
The Customs Service makes use of a sniffer dog for its business, and it's occasionally borrowed by police to uncover drugs coming across Bass Strait, but only occasionally and only after tip-offs.
TT line ships berthed in Devonport on approximately 500 occasions and delivered over 100,000 vehicles into the state. Yet according to the briefing note, you only searched the terminals or the vessels on 14 occasions.
The Police Minister revealed the number of searches is actually double that, and 1 in 5 targeted was carrying drugs. Despite that, the Minister says there's no cause for alarm.
In context, there is no indication of any significant increase.
The Liberals say a 20% hit rate is reason enough for random searches. That idea was all too much for the acting Tourism Minister, trying to promote a doubling in the number of people using the Sydney ferry. 49,000 bookings since January when prices were slashed.
Put your feet here and we want to check you out. I mean, every person coming to Tasmania, you expect to be frisked, do you?
The Health Minister continued to come under pressure over the public housing report released yesterday. It says the current affordable housing strategy isn't a long-term solution to the state's housing crisis, but David Llewellyn denies its tone is negative.
I think we're doing a pretty good job, quite frankly.
But the Liberals' efforts have been partly undone by a newspaper article by Dr, former Hobart Lord Mayor and close friend of the Hodgman family, John Freeman, saying the current health crisis had its origins when the Liberals were last in office.
He's no friend of Labor's, is he? He's no friend of Labor's. He's a Liberal Green.
Brent Blackburn, Win News.
It's time for another controversial campaign to jolt Australians into the realisation that sexually transmitted diseases can kill. That's the message from 70 international delegates at a sexual health conference being held in Hobart.
Most would remember the Grim Reaper AIDS campaign, which first hammered home the threat of HIV in 1987. As a direct result of the education campaign, young men and women reduced their risk behaviour, and for a time the number of people contracting the infection fell.
I think the Grim Reaper, everybody remembers it, but what did we do about it?
Over the last decade, and with a new generation, the figure crept back up. Sexual contact between men continues to be the #1 cause of transmission.
There's a new group of young people who wouldn't have been exposed to the campaigns of the 1980s, so it's really important that we continue those campaigns and keep them up to date.
Around 13,000 Australians are known to have HIV/AIDS, around 100 of those Tasmanian. Strong drug therapy now means the infection is manageable, but experts are pushing for prevention.
We've noticed a slight fall off nationally over the last couple of years, but it still is occurring. So I think there is a degree of complacency in terms of taking up the safer sex message.
Chlamydia is the most common sexually transmissible infection, and it's rapidly rising. Statewide, there's been a 60% increase in men and women aged between 14 and 24 years, while in the north and northwest there's been a 90% jump. It's especially harmful for women. If left untreated, it can lead to infertility.
So it's really important that people, if they think they might have been at risk, can get access to a test and get treated, because quite often the infection has no symptoms.
The conference continues tomorrow. Jane Miller, Win News.
Ahead on Win News, the state government urged to restrict four-wheel drive access to beaches, and INCAT sends an SOS for skilled workers. A Coast Care forum in Burnie has heard threats to Tasmania's coastal areas and wildlife are getting worse through habitat loss and destruction.
The state's hotspot, Robbins Passage and Boolinger Bay, is home to more shorebirds than the rest of Tasmania combined, and is likely to again be nominated for a level of protection through an international listing after failing 3 years ago. Elsewhere, coastal development introduced predators, four-wheel drives and quad bikes are having an increasing impact on even remote stretches of Tasmania's coastline. Today's forum heard shorebirds such as the migrating eastern curlew and the hooded plover may be paying the price, with numbers reduced by 50% over the past 20 years.
No real sense that there is any interest by the government or commitment by the government to protect the coast, and we're seeing inappropriate coastal development and the loss of habitat generally around the state.
At Camdale near Burnie, a waterfront development comprising 72 dwellings has been proposed. There are calls for the 3-hectare block to be left as public space. A colony of little penguins inhabits the site, raising concerns of the potential impacts such a development would have on the birds.
The potential is quite huge. There's very little coastal area being left, just a buffer zone, which is debatable as to whether that's going to be enough for the little penguin colony there.
Public comment on the proposed development can be lodged at the Burnie Council until Monday. The inshore environment also under increasing pressure from introduced species.
The long-spine sea urchin, Centra stephanus, is an example of that. We're also seeing increases in the number of people who are recreationally fishing, and also from a commercial perspective.
In the coming summer, the Tasmanian Aquaculture and Fisheries Institute will repeat some work done 13 years ago, monitoring the health of marine life in the northwest to gauge changes over the period. Stephen Pink, Win News.
Despite decent rainfalls in much of the state over the past month, many places in Tasmania are facing the driest year on record. Weather forecasters say the dry is likely to continue in the next 3 months.
Just 4 months ago, things were looking pretty desperate for farmers. Rainfalls in the past month have given them some needed relief, but it won't mean much if they don't get more.
We certainly need some rains in the next month that are going to provide us with some runoff, or our water storages are still going to be critical going into summer.
Bruce Goss's farm normally looks a lot different this time of year. Usually the ground is so soft it's hard to walk around paddocks, but Bruce had no trouble today. Above average falls in Launceston this month have done little to dent the long-term damage.
If we look at the statistics or the rainfall over a longer period, for example 12 months, the majority of the state is below average.
The southwest is the only part of Tasmania that's escaped with average rainfall. Launceston, Burnie and some surrounding areas are facing their driest year on record. In the year to date, Launceston has received 520 mils of rain compared with an average of 667. Burnie has received 624 mils. Hobart has received 457, while St Helens has received 563 mils. Worrying for Hydro Tasmania, with dams at 30% compared with 45% last year. It's not all bad though. The mild weather has been good for stock and new growth, but farmers say eventually rain is needed.
The fact that we've had below average rainfalls for the last 6 or 8 or 12 months, if we go back that far even, is not good for the storage and the water levels in the ground.
Jessica Longbottom, Win News.
It seems for Tasmanians running red lights, it's a matter of smile you're not on candid camera. There are 3 red light cameras in Hobart and Launceston, but they've been out of commission since last year, since the suppliers went into administration. Police have not been prosecuting those running the red lights as a result. Today the government said it would not be ordering new cameras.
The pilot program has collapsed, that's right, and we're not going to proceed.
The old cameras have been removed. Tasmanian shipbuilding company Incat could miss out on lucrative overseas contracts if it doesn't double its workforce in the next year. Federal Deputy Opposition Leader Jenny Macklin today toured the shipyards and offered the Labor Party's solution to the skills shortage problem.
We've heard it all before, skilled workers leaving our shores for better pay interstate. Incat, once one of the state's largest employers, says the exodus is costing it dearly.
The fact is that labour's not immediately available, the skills aren't available, and it does present a problem, particularly when you're committing to customers and delivery dates.
Incat is continually chasing contracts all over the world, but now with only 300 staff, finds itself on shaky ground. Today inviting Deputy Opposition Leader Jenny Macklin to see what she could do.
At the moment, 40% of apprentices drop out of their apprenticeships because, in many instances, because of the money that they're being paid. So Labor's proposing a $2,000 bonus to encourage them to finish.
Labor would also expand school-based apprenticeships, but unions say merely introducing a completion bonus won't cut it.
It's got to a point where apprentices aren't being trained to a competent standard as where they were 10 years ago. And ultimately all it addresses is the money issue and not the real issue of the skills shortage and how to fix that problem.
The Manufacturing Workers Union has called on the state government and major employers to attend a summit to discuss the issues and a way forward. That idea has so far received only medium support. Emily Groves, Win News.
To sport now with Alex, and bad news for a Tasmanian footballer.
Yes, Penny, Billy Morrison has been delisted by Collingwood. That story next. Then the newest batch of draft hopefuls get put through their paces.
Is the only reward you get from your insurance company a no-claim bonus? Unlike some insurers, Allianz gives an additional reward to safe drivers. It's called a safe driver discount. So switch to Allianz and you could save even more. Call Allianz today on 131000 for a quote and more details.
Good evening. Tasmanian footballer Billy Morrison has been told by Collingwood that his services are no longer required. Morrison was taken at number 17 in the 2003 national draft but has failed to play a senior game. The 19-year-old's departure from the Magpies is the second in recent times, with Braden Shaw also asked to leave Victoria Park. Huonville coach Michael McGregor would love to have a crack at Cygnet in this year's SFL Regional League Grand Final, but to get there his side will have to beat Commandy on Saturday, a team it's struggled against this season. Michael McGregor has played plenty of football in September, premierships with Commandy and Hutchins, as well as taking Hobart to the 2003 Premier League Grand Final. But while he enjoyed his time playing in the Premier League, McGregor's happy to be back playing regional footy.
Probably not the crowd involvement at Premier League that you get at Regional League. Certainly from my point of view, I got a whole lot more abuse in the Regional League than I would have in Premier League, which is great.
On Saturday, McGregor will lead Huonville into a preliminary final against Commandy after the Lions last week upset Dodgers Ferry.
After our heavy game the week before and the heavy conditions, I thought it might be a bit of a struggle, but they just responded really well and ran the game out to the point where we were just completely running over the top of them.
But this week the Lions meet the informed Demons, who got close to knocking off Cygnet last week. Their coach Adam Henley knows Huonville won't be easily beaten.
Yeah, we've got a lot of good runners. They've got obviously the focal points up forward, so yeah, we've got to try and eliminate those.
Saturday's game will be played at the neutral venue of Cygnet. The first bounce will be at 2 o'clock. Good news from Korea, with success for the Tasmanians who took part in the recent President's Hapkido Games in Seoul.
The months of preparation have paid off for the Tasmanians, who competed last Sunday in Korea, the home of Hapkido. The technical difficulty of their presentation won them first place, and the team has been invited by government officials to perform an additional demonstration for the Korean military and police on Friday. Also, a Korean movie producer is considering using at least one team member for a stunt role. In football, a group of AFL draft hopefuls are undergoing 2 days of preparation for the upcoming draft camp in Canberra. Most have under-18 team and Tassie Devils experience. A recovery session this afternoon followed exhausting testing earlier at the Tasmanian Institute of Sport.
They have the facility to run some very similar testing to what happens at the draft camp, so we take every opportunity we can to get the boys as well prepared as they possibly can be before they go away.
At Aurora Stadium, some younger footy aspirants were fighting out the Northern High Schools Association competition finals.
The ball must always be your focus.
And it was Kings Meadows who focused best, 10-6-66, defeating St Patrick's College by 8 points, 8-10-58. The association says the series is becoming so popular, it's heading for expansion.
We're going to get more teams in our footy comp next year. We've got teams coming up from St Mary's and Scottsdale and the outer regions as well.
Peter Gilligan, Win News.
Hobart Chargers coach Mark Chivers is part of a new push for a further indoor sports facility in southern Tasmania. He and a number of basketball representatives met with members of the government this morning to discuss the possibility of a 4-court multi-purpose sports centre. The call comes after the club was forced to turn away fans from the last Chargers home game.
You know, those people that we had to turn away would be very disappointed about the fact that they've probably come, you know, spent a lot of time to find a car park, spent a lot of time to get into the stadium, and then to be told that they couldn't come and watch the game would be very disappointing.
The government says it's keen to listen to the needs of basketball in southern Tasmania. Apart from poor weather on the final day, last week's Tour of Tasmania Cycling Classic has been hailed a success. For one Hobart team, the tour threw up mixed results, but all agree it was worth the effort. Team Praties might not quite be US Postal, but they're certainly on the way up. Illness and bad luck combined to produce average results in the Tour of Tasmania, but they'll head to Victoria next week with high hopes.
We've got 5 days racing on the Tour of Murray River, and that'll be a day at Swan Hill, and then head over to the Murray River, and pretty tough racing over there. It's pretty flat, suit me a lot more.
While Johnston likes the flat, Teammate Daniel Firmston says he's more suited to hills, but that doesn't mean he enjoys them.
Hills suit me. I don't like them because they still hurt you, but I seem to be able to hurt myself a bit more than others.
For Stephen Rossendale, his time racing on the road is aimed at helping his track career.
At the moment I'm pretty much mainly focused on the track endurance, teams pursuit, point score and scratch race side of it. And all these tours basically are just a build-up for a big track season for me.
But whether they prefer the road or the track, all three riders agree being part of a team is the way to go.
It's awesome. It's almost like a second family for me. They're all good blokes and they all look after each other.
The tour of the Murray River starts next Thursday. And Penny, that's all for sport.
Thanks, Alex. The weather next.
Tonight's weather is brought to you by Australian Pensioners Insurance Agency. Other general insurance companies might like to compare themselves with Australian Pensioners Insurance, but really, there's no comparison.
Maximum temperatures were close to average in the west and on the Bass Strait Islands today, and generally 3 to 6 degrees above average elsewhere. The highest was 22 degrees recorded on the east coast at Bicheno. Hobart 18, Port Arthur 14 degrees, Alford 19, Swansea 20, Tarraleah and Strawn 12. Launceston and Burnie 19 degrees, Devonport 15, Bridport 18, Ross 17 and Laowini 10. To boating in northwest to southwesterly winds at 10 to 20 knots, reaching 25 to 30 in the far south at times and 25 knots in the north later. Winds lighter inshore in the east. There's a strong wind warning for the south between Tasman Island and Low Rocky Point for westerly winds. Some drizzle about Strawn mostly tonight, then mainly fine and 13 degrees tomorrow. In the east, St Helens and Swansea fine and 18. Burnie and Devonport 15 and fine tomorrow and Friday, staying fine and slightly warmer Saturday and Sunday. Early frost about Launceston tomorrow, then fine and 17 degrees, with fine weather expected the following few days. Hobart fine and 17 tomorrow, a shower or two Friday, then fine over the weekend with a top of 19 degrees on Sunday. And that's Wind News for this Wednesday. Check windnet.com.au for state news headlines. I'm Penny Tame. Good night.